Hello, good morning. Welcome to the City Council meeting, the second one in April. I'm going to ask you to stand for our invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Invocation delivered by Reverend Tommy Hall. Tommy, would you mind going to the podium for us, please? Thank you, sir.
Our Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this opportunity here in our community to gather together to seek your wisdom, your guidance for the heart of our city, our community. And we pray for your favor, your blessings, your mercy and grace upon this council meeting today. Lord, give wisdom, give guidance, give all of your leading, everything that is needed for your word and your blessing. We thank you for this day where the rains are coming down upon our community, rains that speak of the blessing of God. And so we receive your blessing, we receive your guidance. As you declared through the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 55, for as the rain and the snow come down from heaven, and do not return there until they have watered the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth, and it shall not return to me void, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and it shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it. Lord, send your word, just as you have sent your rain today, in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, PC. Did I call you Tommy Hill? I know. Did I call you Tommy Hill? I'm sorry. I hate to get names wrong. Tommy Hayes, thank you. Ceremonial matters, proclamations, and employee recognitions.
No employee recognitions today, and I'll have an update for the council on future recognitions.
Very good, thank you. Council comments?
I have one. I'd like to clear up some misunderstandings from last week's candidate forum regarding the eclipse. A candidate said he was appalled that the city had done nothing to prepare for the eclipse. And I just wanted to clear the air and let y'all know that the city's been meeting since October of 2020, planning through contingencies. And there are a vast number of stakeholders, state, federal, county, local, library, chamber, businesses, the schools, all over the place. The last budget, we approved $35,000 in eclipse-related items. And what else? The Parks Department has sold all RV spaces, and they're half full on their primitive tent camping spots. Jennifer Krupa secured porta potties 2 years ago, so we are set on that. And electric message boards, dumpsters, hand wash stations, signage. There's a spreadsheet that other cities have asked us for because we are so far ahead of them in planning for it. So if you have any questions, please go to eclipsenfbgtx.org. There's a lot of information there, and I encourage everyone to be informed on what we're doing. Thanks.
Thank you.
I attended the Airport Advisory Board meeting yesterday. T-hangar occupancy is 100% with 28 on the waiting list. We have 2 fly-ins coming up this month, the TAC Arrow, which are the tail draggers, and they'll be here on the 22nd. And then T6 will be here on April 26th to the 30th, and they're expecting around 25 T6s in for that. So should be good. And fuel sales are still on pace to sell over 500,000 gallons this year. Not quite what last year, but they're starting to pick up this last month. So things are looking good at the airport.
Thank you. Item number 6, consent agenda. 2 minutes from previous meetings, March 28th and April 4th, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 street closure requests, Fredericksburg Car Fest in June, Fredericksburg Craft Beer Festival in June, Oktoberfest, obviously October, Fredericksburg Morning Rotary Club's annual Kraut Run, October, and the Fredericksburg Food and Wine Fest in October. Council, what's your pleasure? You want to pass this as a consent agenda or pull any of it?
That's fine. I move that we approve all 6 items on the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second to approve this as a consent agenda item. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain, just because I'm a member of the rotary.
All right, vote is 4 in favor and 1 abstention. Sir?
I didn't understand why he was abstaining.
Oh, why are you abstaining?
Member of
Rotary.
which is right.
You're part of the Rotary. Okay. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 7A, consideration of a conditional use permit to operate an STR facility in an R2 zoned area, abutting a non-residential zoning district for property located at 112 East Schubert. Shall we go to Ms. Hudson first?
Good morning, Mayor and Council. We're here this morning to look at 112 East Schubert. It is in the historic district. It is an R2 zone property, and it may look familiar. You saw it before. It got a CUP to operate as an unoccupied STR, and today the applicant is back, the new owner is back to request a facility. So converting an existing structure into a new unit and expanding the occupancy of the main house by 2 by adding a new bedroom. It's an existing room, but converting it essentially into a bedroom. So this went before Planning and Zoning on April 5th and received a recommendation for approval, and staff is recommending approval based on the size of the lot. There's ample parking and no real change to the property itself. The owner is here, and we can go into more detail, or if you have questions, happy to answer anything that you might have.
Okay. We will hold a public hearing on this item.
Make a motion, we go to public hearing. Second.
Motion second to go from regular to public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're now in public hearing. Would you mind identifying yourself?
Yeah, good morning, Council. My name is John Ellis. My wife Bethany and I are proud to be members of this community by buying this property last year. And if now's the time, I'd be happy to tell you a little bit about our application and about ourselves. So as Ms. Hudson said, we acquired this property last year. We've been operating as a short-term rental since we acquired it to help offset the costs when we're not able to come and stay and use it ourselves. My wife and I, before we get to the application, it might be helpful to know a little bit about me. My wife and I are both from a small town of Brownwood, Texas, about an hour and a half up the road on the edge of the hill country. Not as pretty of a hill country as Gillespie County, but we've been coming to Fredericksburg our entire lives. The first B&B I ever stayed at was in this community. I have fond memories of visiting here as a kid, and then as a young adult with our family and different events, and then as a married couple for anniversary trips, and now as a father, bringing our boys here to get out of the city, to enjoy the beautiful aspects of this community and the hill country. And if I must say, one of the finest museums for a community this size in the country. And so my boys love to come here, particularly to the Nimitz Museum and the Pacific War Theater Museum. But enough about us. But with that background in mind, I think it's probably no surprise that when we had the opportunity to look at buying a home here, we seized upon it. And we bought our place here on Schubert Street late last year. And as I said, we've been operating that as a short-term rental unoccupied since we've acquired it. We've had no complaints. We've had wonderful guests, and we're thrilled to be part of this community. We're excited to be giving back to the community in a more meaningful way by allowing to share our home with guests that are coming here to explore and enjoy this city. We're happy to be in a community that values the benefit of free market, that values private property rights, and allows small businesses like ours an opportunity to thrive and foster and to give back. And so with that in mind, the property when we acquired it had been permitted last year by the previous owners as a short-term rental unoccupied. 2-bedroom house. The main home, which is the historic home on the property, a picture of it's on page 64 of your packet. But the property is about a 2,500 square foot home. It has 3 rooms. So we requested to amend the conditional use permit. It's an R2 zone property. We are next to some very busy neighbors that have commercial dwellings. There's the Bucko Bynes Bar and Grill next door, as well as the Mini Mart gas station and convenience store that operate next door to our property. So the main house, as I said, was permitted under the 2022 ordinance as a short-term rental unoccupied 2-bedroom. We're asking to amend that to allow us to use the full house, all 3 rooms in the house, which would change the capacity from 6 adults to 8 adults. In addition, while we're here, there is a carriage house on our property. It's currently unfinished, but we want to explore finishing that out to provide for overflow for our guests or as an alternative option for guests to rent and use when they come to town. And so the nature of our request is twofold: to amend the existing permit for the main structure, but also to allow us to finish out the carriage house and allow up to 6 adults to stay there. So some questions you might have, as Ms. Hudson mentioned, parking. Right now we have a capacity for up to 8 vehicles to park in the private driveway on the property. It's an original town lot from the city of Fredericksburg, lot 527, approximately a little under half an acre. So it's a 100 by 200 foot rectangle, like the original town lots were laid out. So we have a little under half an acre. We're asking to have capacity for up to 14 adults at any given time. Under the ordinance that as it currently exists, parking requires for that capacity of a facility permit, which I understand is what we would have to have at this point, 60% of the adults, which is we need to have at least 9 spots for parking. So on site, we have up to 8, including tandem parking. Under the ordinance, we're allowed to use some street parking. And with 200 feet of street frontage, we can have up to 8 additional cars on the street. I do not anticipate that we would ever have that many cars for the amount of people that we're talking about perhaps entertaining at this property. With that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I think that gives a general summary of where we stand and what our property entails, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I know that the council probably will have some questions for you in a moment, but I'd like to invite anybody else that's here to speak on this before we do that and go back into regular session. Is anybody here to speak on this issue? We're in public hearing. You and Graves, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Hugh Reeves. I live across the street at 103 East Schubert from this property. And I would be opposed to the extended number of guests. The issues we have with parking is from Buck's Bar and Grill already. There are only 2 permanent residents on this street. My wife and I, and then neighbors across the street at 108 East Schubert. There are already 2 STRs on the street and no other permanent residents. It's a matter of need. We're trying to preserve our neighborhood, and we would like to keep it a quiet neighborhood. And so I'm just asking that you would consider that this 3rd room was never built or intended as a bedroom. The carriage house has no plumbing, no facilities for living in it. So I would ask you to dig deeper into this request and know that, okay, perhaps with the 2 rooms, it would be acceptable, but the overcrowding of turning a room that was never intended to be a bedroom into a bedroom would not be something that would be beneficial to us. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else? Still in public hearing on this item? All right.
Move we go out of public hearing.
Second.
Motion second to go out of public hearing back into regular session. All in favor, please say aye.
Question for him.
Go ahead.
The carriage house is there a historic structure? Is that like all new, or is there a historic structure there?
It's an existing structure. We've not really looked at it because they've not requested any exterior changes at this point, but any exterior changes would require HRB approval.
So the 14 occupancy is with the finished out of the carriage house.
Correct.
So what would be the occupancy if it were just a historic home? Mr. Ellis probably knows that.
8.
I think it's 8.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did I hear you say you're looking for an occupancy of 14?
Yes, so the carriage house has 2 rooms. If we were to finish it out, it would have 2 bedrooms, which under the ordinance allows for up to 6.
I didn't see any plans for the carriage house. Did I miss that? Are they in the packet?
The
No.
carriage house shows on page 52 of the packet shows the overview of the property that this council reviewed before, but there are no plans at this point because we have to go through all of that work with a contractor, electrician, and a plumber. But before we invest more into that, we need to make sure that it's going to be a viable project that can be approved. And so that's the process. But it would be a 2-bedroom. There are two bedrooms in the structure. I think they're shown in some detail on 52 of your packet, but it would be a 2-bedroom unit. And the carriage house is the current footprint, which is approximately 750 square feet.
I saw on something that was 550 square feet. And so you're asking for 6 people into 550 square feet. Single pipe.
It's the carriage house itself is 700. Excuse me. Just go to page 53. I don't know if we can pull up your packet on the screen for folks to see. The carriage house is approximately 750 square feet. That's based on the CAD records as well as my measurements. And the carport itself is approximately 480 square feet.
So are you going to be converting the parking spaces?
I'm sorry, I may have seen that. It says 550 square feet on page 52. You're correct.
I realize there's some square footage. My whole point being is that we're trying to keep the numbers down, as we talked about in the new short-term rental estimates or opinions. And so I'm totally against having that big a group there. I think 8 to 10 is about all you need. I realize you got Bucks right next door, but if you guys remember, this was the same piece of property about a year ago, or not even a year ago, that we approved the short-term rental, and the next day it went up for sale. Not that you're going to do that, Mr. Ellis. I assume you bought it.
Sir, we bought it with a long-term view. If my wife and I could live here, we would, but we can't leave the city at this point in our life for various reasons. We currently live in Austin. I understand that whatever handicap that might place on my application, even some of this council, I've been able to overcome that. But it is, it's zoned R2. It's zoned to where there can be infill, and so we think that this is fulfilling or in furtherance of that zoning to try to provide additional housing and occupancy for individuals in the neighborhood. I can understand that there's concern with having 6 guests in the current footprint of 550 square feet, but we're asking to have an option to utilize that additional space. And if that it is, so the main house is about 2,450 square feet. If we had 8 adults there from the current permit of 6, that'd be over 300 square feet per adult of livable space. I don't have all the numbers, but I know the council has those availability. I think that is well within, probably greater than the average amount of square footage per adult for the main house. For having 6 adults, which is what I'm not aware of a limitation based on the 550 square foot size of the carriage house as its current footprint that would prohibit it from having up to 6 adults. Now, whether 6 adults in this market want to stay there, I can't control that, and I don't know if they will. But there is a bedroom that has air conditioning unit in that carriage house now. It doesn't have plumbing. We would have to do that, have to get that complete, have to make sure it's feasible to finish this out.
Am I missing something on the narrative from this application on page 54 of our packet, council? Bullet point, I don't know, middle of the page. It talks about following the requested changes result in the following maximum capacity for the 2 structures of 12.
Yes, no, you're not missing anything, Mr. Hoover. Mayor Hoover, that was what we submitted. When we got to the P&Z Commission, it was presented and discussed as having up to 6 because I think the staff had seen that it would be a 2-bedroom unit, which under the ordinance allows for up to 6. The way we had drafted it was up to 4. But the way it was presented at the P&Z was for 6. So that's what we are asking for today.
So you're requesting today additional from what you submitted in the application. 2 more people capacity, because your request was for 12. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Based off of the way I'm trying to make sure we're consistent with how we discussed it with the P&Z.
Yeah.
And I understand that in our application we requested 4.
Okay. Do we have, I'm sorry to ask an ignorant question. Is there what is the maximum occupancy in our current SDR?
So currently it's per unit would be 12.
Okay.
A
Per
max of
unit,
12.
but I mean, it's still a per bedroom thing, 2 per bedroom plus 1 with a maximum of
12,
12.
yes. And so we don't have language specific to a max on a facility.
You're aware that we've been reviewing SDR ordinance quite a while, and we're looking at a particular objective with SDRs, even in R2 cuts, in terms of numbers and numbers of people and how they impact the neighborhood and so forth. You're aware of all.
Yes, Mayor. I'm aware that the council has been wrestling with issues of how to balance the competing interests for STRs.
Correct.
And it's my understanding the application is consistent with the current ordinance. And I don't know where the council is going to fall and where the community is going to fall, obviously, on what may change.
Right.
So Anna, do we need to approve a conditional use permit to get him up to 8 people in the existing house?
Yes, at this point, any change to the existing permit would require a CUP. So expanding the occupancy of just the main house, which is currently six, yes, to move it up to 8 would require your approval.
I have trouble approving occupancy for a building that doesn't have any plumbing.
Well, you're not issuing a permit. They would still have to go through all the permitting side. So this is just giving them the ability, like he said, before he goes and spends the money. You're okay with the concept based on really more the site plan and the use of the property. And so staff would then, of course, work with them on the building permit to make sure everything's up to code. And then he would still have to apply for the STR permit and meet all of those requirements.
Thank you for that explanation.
So I have 2 thoughts. One, prior council set up the cut process to give a little bit more flexibility as we look at specific units. And two of those criteria are, 1, to minimize potentially unfavorable impacts, and 2, to not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare to properties in the vicinity. And we've heard from the next door neighbor who has indicated that it's not. I'm sorry, that was I think one of the comments that was given. The next door neighbor. We just heard from a across the street neighbor. It's a beautiful home. I saw the rosebudfpg.com. You've got 2 queen beds in each of the bedrooms already. It's lovely. The pictures are great. I just personally, I think 6 is good, and especially as we're so soon going to be evaluating if it's going to be 200 square feet per person, or all those specifics that we're going through. I think 6 is good for now.
Ms. Councilwoman Kirchner, just to be clear, to change from 6 to 8, that would allow for 306 square feet per person at 8 capacity.
I see your floor plan. That's
Okay.
great.
And it's a 3-bedroom home, so I think that is
The office nook is cozy. It's 12 by 5.
No, ma'am, it's not the office nook we're talking about. On page of your packet,
Okay, I'm sorry. 8 by 11.
that's approximately correct. Yes, there is a third room that guests have used for their children, as well as guests that may want to stay there separate from that. So it is certainly, I think, consistent with under what you mentioned about square footage per person. The ask to change from 6 to 8 is consistent with that number and exceeds it, as well as obviously the current ordinance as it current stands.
I'm comfortable with 8 on the existing dwelling, but not approving the 4 for the carriage house. That's just too much, too many.
So he's asking for 6.
Oh, that's, okay, that too.
It's a moot point.
Yeah.
I'm not for approving carriage houses. We don't know what it is. We haven't seen the plans, right? Am I correct? Am I missing something about the P&Z dealing with this? Wouldn't they want to see building plans and?
Well, yeah, P&Z doesn't really get into the building plan again, if it meets the code
Okay,
and if it's got the square footage and
so they're strictly looking at this is
it's more of a site plan
R2
review.
property, a cut process, and here's the potential. Okay.
And they have to come back and get a permit for the carriage house.
Through administratively through staff only.
Okay.
Yes.
I can see Mr. Ellis's point in that he wants to know whether it's going to be approved so he continue with the build out of the carriage house. But I'm not comfortable approving that. But I can understand why he would ask for it.
And for any number, you're not comfortable for approving for any number of additional guests and that additional improvement on the property.
I'm not saying that. I would like to see plans on the carriage house and how the configuration would be, and whether P&Z and Historic Review Board would approve it. I'd like it to go through that before we approve a CUP that takes in 14 resident guests.
I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm learning this process as we go. The floor plan for the carriage house has been presented. It is currently a 2-room carriage house with a solarium, a larger seating area. If it were finished out, the 2 rooms would be converted into 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom would be placed inside, consistent with the building code permits and requirements. The rooms, as they're currently set, are adequate size under the International Residential Code in the carriage house to be utilized as a habitable bedroom. And so what we're asking for is if we were able to finish out to add plumbing to that structure and have a 2-bedroom habitable unit consistent with the code that complies with the building process, to the extent there are additional exterior changes, we would go through the Historic Review Commission to make sure those are approved. But to do all that, obviously, we would be investing additional of our hard-earned dollars towards that project. And we're asking to make sure before we make those investment dollars that we would have the ability to lease that to tenants.
I can see why you would want to do that, but I think we're uncomfortable with the 14 people size.
And well, that's expanding of the ordinance anyway.
Yeah. Above what the ordinance.
We have 12 as a limit for a reason. The paragraph in the narrative too, Tom, help me here. The request is for a 3-bedroom short-term unit within the main structure and a 2-bedroom short-term rental unit within the existing carriage house. The development is proposing a 4 parking space, etc., which will meet the requirements. Occupancy for the 3-bedroom unit would be 8, and the 2-bedroom unit would have an occupancy of 6 for a total of 12. 8 and 6 is 14. What did y'all deal with?
That's what I wanted.
Okay, is this a mistake? Page 44.
I think you stated that this proposal is different than what passed P&Z. You increased the occupancy.
No, sir. As it was discussed a few weeks ago at P&Z in the staff's memo in connection with that presentation, they referenced 6. So consistent with that, we were asking for 6 today. As a fallback, and as initially presented in their papers, we would be comfortable with requesting 4 from this council. If 6 is a hang-up that is a concern for having that many people in a property that's 550 square feet, then we would fall back to having the 2 bedrooms with just 2 people in each. But again, the way we can look back if we need to, and I'm happy to provide a supplemental response. But as it was discussed at P&Z, it was mentioned 6.
And is our maximum occupancy in the facility still 12?
The ordinance doesn't speak to a facility max occupancy. It speaks to individual units as a max of 12, with 2 per bedroom with an additional 2 guests
So a facility could have 30 or more.
or more.
Okay. Tom, do you have another comment?
I think this part includes a house, you've got 3 bedrooms, 2, 4, 6, plus 2, that's 8. Then in the carriage house, you've got 2 bedrooms, 2, 4, plus 2, 6, there's 4.
So technically, right? So that's the technical max per structure. But you can approve as much of that or none of that. But 14 would be the absolute max per the STR ordinance.
Well, my view is that going from, I know that the objective of an STR operator is to get as many people in a facility as possible because that's how you make money. I get that. And if you can follow the code and you get as many people in as many bedrooms as possible, our job is to make sure they're following the codes and all that sort of thing. But also we have a peripheral concern about how it impacts the community. I mean, how it impacts the neighborhood. I know this abuts O'Brien's. I remember it was September that we approved the STR permit, and then it went for sale the next day, which is, America. 8 in the building, okay, but I'm uncomfortable approving anything in the carriage house. That's my view. And the reason is because it adds density to the property in that neighborhood. The request is, even if we say, well, we won't do 14, but we'll do 12, I still don't like the increased activity at that spot. It's exactly the reverse direction of what we're trying to do otherwise with recreating integrity of neighborhoods and finding some solution to housing. I know that nobody's going to buy his property and raise their kids there at whatever you probably paid for it. That's my view. Is that, and unless you could come back, I suppose, and say we've done the care. I understand you would like to have approval before you spend the money, and we would like to have the request approval. I would like to have the approval of the request fully vetted before I approve any further STR gas on this property.
Anna, do we know the occupancy of the other STRs on this block?
I know that there. Oh, sorry, Ms. Hudson, go ahead.
I don't believe that's shown on the exhibits, no.
Well, Mr. Wright now got his permit, but he's long-term rental. He's just in case. You've got the house up on the corner, nothing going next door to it.
Within the surrounding blocks, Mr. Klein, so we're on Schubert Street, which you're more familiar probably than I am, but it's just a couple blocks from Main Street, about a block and a half from Mark Plots. 3 doors down, there is the Resman compound, I believe is what they call it. That has capacity to, I think, to 14 or 16 adults. A few doors down, across Llano Street, there's a property currently for sale that is a facility that operates up to, I don't know the numbers.
That's on East Schubert, right?
Our property is on East Schubert.
Right, but the other properties across the.
Other properties I just mentioned were on Schubert as well. There's short-term.
It is a large one. Yeah.
And our lot is larger than the lots that I'm speaking to you about. We have nearly half an acre that we're asking to have flexibility to have up to 14 or be it 12 adults. And it's currently operating, as I said, since I've not met Mr. Reeves. I look forward to speaking with him as his neighbor. I haven't received any complaints from him about our guests who stayed there. We haven't had any complaints from anybody with the city or our guests or our neighbors about any of our visitors to our property. And so we are just seeking to have the flexibility to utilize this property consistent with the current ordinances, which based on the head count and the square footage per person that the council is currently considering, would also, I think, be consistent with that.
You've been operating with a capacity of 6?
Yes, sir.
Well, that might explain part of why you're not getting complaints.
I'm not sure. We've had, kids there, because the ordinance only talks to adults, so we've had more than 6 people there, on some of our guests.
Hannah, does this application meet all the requirements of our current ordinance?
Yes, sir. We did the evaluation based on the current ordinance.
Okay, so R2 facility, occupancy, parking, everything matches our current ordinance.
Yes, sir.
And all criteria, including minimizing potential unfavorable impacts.
I mean, that's why it's conditional. If you felt like there were issues you wanted to mitigate or could mitigate, maybe with landscaping or screening or what
Occupancy.
occupancy.
Making sure.
I noticed they did build the fence between their house and the Smith's house.
That was a requirement for the original STR.
Right. Right.
It is busy. I mean, we get lots of overflow from Main Street to park on Schubert Street, in addition to our neighbors that are operating commercial spaces all through long hours of the day. But we are providing parking for 8 people off-site. If the council is going to require us to provide parking for the full 9, if the council were to approve the full up to 14 people, we would do that. If it's approved for 12, it's already got the parking offsite that they won't be utilizing the street parking, even though we have under the ordinance the right to use the street parking.
Is that offsite or onsite?
It's offsite. So we have a private driveway in the back of the property
Right.
that can house up to 8 vehicles when parked in tandem.
Okay, I need some education. Mick, you can help me with this, please. Anybody. If he were coming today and saying, here are the plans for the carriage house to accommodate 4 more people, and here he's shown the plans to accommodate 2 more people in the main house. So he's 8 plus 4, which is our maximum. And we've asked him to follow the codes, and it was approved in STR back in September because it fit the cut process. I mean, the owner fulfilled the obligation. It's clear that they were just wanting the STR. Or it appears to me that they were wanting the permit so that they could sell immediately. I don't know anything about the carriage house, but if he were to be allowed to put 4 more people in the carriage house and it meets our code occupancy maximum, don't we have some a way to reserve approval until we know what he's going to do at the carriage house, just based on right now we know the square footage would allow it, but we don't know anything else.
I really think that, of course, you have the right, as Anna said, we use this as our zoning tool to regulate this type of property or conditions to ameliorate any impact on the surrounding community that may worry you or may be in line with the objectives you're trying to reach with your ordinance. But some of those considerations you're discussing, Mayor, are brought later at the permitting stage. This is more of the first in several approvals required for this property. They still have to go to historic review commission. You still have to apply for a permit, a complete application that's been vetted. So if you have in mind some particular impacts this property may have on the surrounding neighborhood or the community at large, you could consider some conditions. But the way you've posed the question, I think they've complied with the ordinance and it's gone through the P&Z process. That's really where you are, unless you want to add conditions this council identifies.
Okay, so my choice today is that I could approve his increased capacity request for the main house, because the footage is right and it's within our code. And he wants to add, let's say, 4 more, which I wouldn't approve 14 because that's over code, but let's say 4 more. And then he still has to he can't start operating the carriage house right away. He still has to come back to say, I have retrofitted this structure to request 4 more people. He has to come back.
Not to the city council. He has to go through the permitting process, to the
Okay.
historic review commission.
So he would have the authority of the city. I can do this, here's my specifics.
Well, because the first inquiry and the first step in the process that we have is the zoning issue. And that's all you have.
Okay. Well, my condition would be a maximum of 12.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mick. That's helpful. This is the conundrum we have with the rules that exist right now, SDRs, and also the application before us is for 12. I understand you expand. You want to move this, council, any further?
Is the application before us for 12 or 14?
On the paper, it's 12.
12. I make a motion we approve this with a maximum of 12 occupants.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve this application conditioned to 12 occupant maximum. Mick, you look like you're about to say something.
No, sir.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? All right. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
All right. The vote is 4-1. Ms. Kirchner is opposed. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, council.
Yeah. Oh, do you have a local contact? Do you live here? You live in Austin.
I live in Austin.
Okay. So do you have a local you know the regulations about local contacts and so forth?
Yes, we have. We've been employing many local contacts to help with various issues at the property. We have a local person who's helping with property management. Yes.
Okay. And you're aware, and I'm not grilling you, John. I just want to make sure you're aware that you know that the regulation is that the local contact person must be in when the property is occupied. They need to be able to respond within a timely manner to if there's a complaint or something like that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Council, if you'll allow me just one departure before we move on to the next item. In Mr. Ellis's application on page 59, and this is irrespective of what we just did on the vote, it is an education matter. He quotes the Texas Supreme Court and Spann versus City of Dallas and also Lombardo versus City of Dallas regarding the property rights. And this has been a huge issue, obviously, with the discussion of SDRs for the last 2 years. One side has used the property rights argument to, and has used the property rights argument to make those arguments a priority over anything that the police power of a city has in zoning. And it's unclear to me what that means. I'm sorry, I've read lots of materials and lots of case studies, but if we have the authority to zone anything, then that circumvents absolute property rights. Otherwise, it means nothing for us to have a zoning or a comprehensive plan or anything like that. We all know that there are rules and regulations about how you can use your property. What am I missing in this argument? Nick, help me.
I'll try to help you, Mayor. All property is held subject to the valid exercise of zoning. That's the U.S. Supreme Court. That's the basis of it. So if you have a zoning ordinance, which we do, most cities do, every piece of property in town is subject to that ordinance if it's been adopted in accordance with state law through the process. So zoning, definitely, the use of property has been held not to abridge constitutional right to ownership of property. The exception is if the regulations basically under federal law destroy all use of the property, and under state law destroy all use or damage the property so that it has no use. In the context of SDRs, for instance, typically in 95% of the units I'm aware of in Fredericksburg. The properties have a use today, whether they're an STR or not. So refusing an STR to locate in a particular zoning district or refusing some type of zoning approval for an STR certainly does not destroy all use of the property. The current use can continue. And that's the problem with the attack of a zoning ordinance. It's very difficult to show that the public interest in protection of public health, safety, and welfare, represented by the police power exercise of zoning, destroys all use of the property. Most recently, the Texas Supreme Court upheld that concept in an Austin case about 7 or 8 years ago. In addition to zoning, though, your STR regulations regulate not only location in appropriate zone districts with those appropriate zoning controls, you also regulate the permitting and operations of those businesses. Now, it is true they've been held to be residential in nature. That's in the particular context of a lawsuit that was brought. But in many ways, they're more similar to a home occupation than pure residential, which have been upheld. Home occupation regulations and restrictions have been upheld by the courts uniformly. They really isn't a matter that's subject to inquiry anymore by the courts. But STRs in particular provide venues for guests who typically are not familiar with the community to come visit our community. In many ways similar to what a hotel or bed and breakfast or other facility do. And so there's an obligation to protect those guests in terms of fire safety and health safety and so forth. Federal government has no rules on that. The state has no rules to protect those guests. County has no rules to protect those guests. Only the city can. And so you do have an obligation to protect the guests that visit our community and use those facilities, especially in the field of fire protection and fire safety. You're all aware of all the many requirements hotels and other boarding facilities have to follow for that purpose. So a minimum level of protection for fire protection is certainly something that's a fundamental governmental interest for guests of these facilities. Also, the preservation of some single-family neighborhoods has been recognized as a reasonable governmental interest, and some regulations to support that goal of having single-family residential in your community has been upheld by the courts as something you can try to address. In addition, there are some adverse secondary effects on the community that can occur depending on the density of short-term rentals. And I think as you alluded to earlier, Mayor, the availability of owner-occupied housing in the community, affordable owner-occupied housing, and workforce housing and low-income housing broadly in the community can be an adverse secondary effect if density of STRs gets too high. And there are studies on that, but there's a lot of findings by other communities, other cities, large and small, on that issue, that is a legitimate concern. So regulation of density can address some of those adverse effects. That is not a denial of individual property rights. As long as your regulations aren't arbitrary and capricious and they're based on what you believe as the legislative body in this community of what the interests can be served. So it really requires a review of each regulation individually, uh, specifically to determine if those community interests are served by your regulation, and don't impose an arbitrary burden on owners of STRs. So that's probably more than you want to know.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mick. All right, we're at item 7B, conditional use permit to operate an STR unoccupied and R2 zoned area in the historic district on property located at 501 East Creek. Anna?
All right, so this is an existing short-term rental. It's been in operation for several years. However, it's before you today because the permit expired, and it is an R2 historic district. So had it not been in the historic district, she could have just reapplied and gone through an administrative approval. However, we do have the conditional use permit requirement in the historic district. So she's before you today. She's not asking for any increase in occupancy or changes to the property. Just essentially to reinstate the permit that she had. It expired in August of 22, and she submitted a renewal in January of 23. And so given that length of expiration, staff had to send it through the conditional use permit. But the owner is here.
All right, we have a public hearing scheduled for this.
We'll make a motion, go into public hearing.
Second. Motion and second, go out of regular and public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone here? Oh,
I'm the owner. If you have any questions.
would you mind identifying yourself?
Yes,
and
my
please
name is
proceed.
Catherine Langer. I've owned the property for 5 years. I purchased it. It was an already existing short-term rental for many years before I purchased it 5 years ago. And yeah, I didn't realize that my permit was expiring, and thus there was a lapse, and it's trying to reapply it.
Can you explain the process, how you found out that it had expired and what the lapse time frame was?
Yes, so it expired the end of August 2022. I had no idea it had expired. In fact, I submitted my quarterly hotel occupancy taxes the end of September and again the end of December. In January, I needed a copy of my permit for something unrelated, and so I called the city to see about getting a copy, and that's when I was told that it had expired. So immediately that day, I started going through the process. At that time, they told me I just needed to submit the funds and so on and so forth, which I did immediately online with their help. And then it was about, I think, like a month or so later that I was told that I had to go through this process.
Do you reside on this property too?
No,
You live in Fredericksburg?
no, I live in Austin.
You've been operating how long?
5 years.
It just brings up a great process question, and I thank you for coming forward, and applying again and everything. But I'm just curious what notification we have in place for people. It sounds like there's the capacity within Granicus to issue those sorts of, hey, in 30 days, hey, in 7 days.
So there was no notification whatsoever, which was one of the issues I had. I brought up. I said, if I had known, if I had received an email, if I had received something in the mail, of course, I would have renewed immediately. And I was told that there wasn't enough staff to be able to do that.
Is that still the situation? There's no notification licenses are expired.
Currently with Granicus, no, but the new software that we're moving towards, that's one of the things that we really like about their permitting software specific to the short-term rentals is we can do mass notification. Expirations, yes.
It's well known that we've had some issues with the notification process. And it is, in my view, up to the city to be absolutely on the top shelf of taking care of this, and I know we're moving toward that. We got slammed with some unfortunate circumstances with the previous vendor, and it put us off our game. I feel like we're now making some good progress toward getting command of that process and that information. Based on that, in fact, if you testify, you're up on your hot. I've been operating for 5 years, and everybody loves your place and brags on it, right?
Never had any issues.
Okay. Because council, I think, here's my opinion, because we've had these issues and we're getting better and on the way to, and it's not so much a lack of staff. I mean, we always, we have a great staff. I think it was just the issue of trying to get in with a vendor who was not helping us, and it took so long for us to understand that was not going to work at all. And now we're sort of starting from scratch again. Staff is on it, and I'm very pleased and proud of that. So I would be in favor
Does this set a precedent?
of gracing her on this one time. Sorry?
Is this, I'd like to ask Nick if this sets a precedent that other people that
Okay.
don't.
None whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
You have to consider the facts of each case separately, and there is no precedent set by any of the decisions.
Thank you.
I guess just to add to that, she has paid hot. We can confirm that. And by letting it expire, and now she's having to come up to the new requirements. So right under the 2018 that she was operating on, technically she only needed 1 parking spot, but she does have 3 on site. So she is meeting the 2022 ordinance.
Since her permit expired, she now is liable to, or required to meet the new standard. Okay, you're aware of all that, Heather?
Yes.
And they've visited with you about what that means?
Yes.
Okay.
The question is, how many are there out there?
I don't know. I mean, he's like this, where they didn't get noticed. You understand, though, Catherine, that, well, here's my view. I don't speak for the council. That an owner operator is still their responsibility.
Yes.
Okay.
I make a motion, we approve what? We need to go out of public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. And I guess you want to question.
That's okay. Anyone else here to speak on this? All right, we can go back into regular.
Make a motion, we go out of public hearing.
Second. Motion to go back into regular. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Questions
Bob.
for her?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I make a motion, we approve the request for the cup approval on 7B.
Second.
All right, I have a motion second to approve this as presented. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. You're a well-behaved dog.
Thank you.
Item 7C, creation of a public housing authority. This item was requested on the agenda by council members Kirchner and Bobby Watson. I'd like to recognize Ms. Kirchner.
Thank you. Got some notes I want to try to get through. We brought this topic up to act on our community's repeated desire to address more affordable housing options in our community. We need a viable option for Fredericksburg so our teachers, first responders, and those who provide critical services can sustainably contribute to the thriving and safety of this place. So just let me be clear, there is no perfect solution. I think we would have probably found it by now. It's been an issue for a while. Lots of information, emails are already swirling, so I feel very strongly that if we keep waiting for the perfect solution, we're going to wait another few decades. What I hope that we're working towards is ensuring the most flexibility and control to the residents of this community. And that should be the barometer by which these concepts will be evaluated. The action here is to vet the concept of housing authority and have a plan to act on that and make a decision. So this concept is not new. It came from one of the options in the affordable housing study that was commissioned by a whole group of people, the city, the county, the school, the hospital, the chamber, the EDC, Fisher and Weezer, Texas Wine Collective, Hill and Vine. Many people came together, hired Vince Michelle. He created the study that's available online, and a housing authority was one of those options. So what it is, what it isn't. It is not a taxing entity. It is something that was created to help solve problems like what we're having here. And I hope that we can kind of have a high level discussion now at this meeting. And then I would propose that we have a workshop next week, maybe one evening that works with everyone's schedules, so we can get into the weeds, provide public input, and then bring it to a vote on May 2nd at our next council meeting. So that's my 2 cents. Bobby, do you have anything?
I agree with Emily on all those points. We've talked about it for years and years, and everything we've brought up, there's been opposition to. It is a need in our community, and I think we need to address it. I think after looking into this, I think this is a viable option for us, and we really need to approve it. There are many, many communities in the state of Texas that have housing authorities, and some of them are our neighbors, and from big to small. So I think it's definitely a viable option that we really need to move forward with.
So what I'm hearing, Councilman Watson and Kirchner, is this is the first revelation of this possibility for us to consider to consider. In other words, you recognize there's a process, and there are people out there with what they think they understand the public housing authority is. Maybe they're right, maybe not. But we have an education campaign and lots of discussion going on about this. Is that your purpose?
Yeah, I would just clarify, this isn't our first time being made aware of it, because they've been around for a long time, and they were in the report that was published over a year ago with specific items that we could address. A MUD was one of them, and we did have a MUD. I don't think we've done anything else. So
okay.
Now's a good time.
So let's look at this. Okay.
In fact, the state authorized housing authorities in the 60s, I think. If that's not wrong. And there's a fairly large percentage of towns in Texas that have housing authorities. So it's not something we've just never done.
Not new. Any other comments?
I have a question. There's been a long uphill education for me here, and both of them helped me. So I have a question. The authority is run by a board that's appointed by the mayor, am I correct? So the city has no obligation for anything except to keep that board running once we approve it. Am I understanding correctly?
That's correct. We're not a backstop for them. We don't have to take on anything that they propose.
And so today, all we're discussing is whether to move forward with our education of this, right?
Yes. I would like to propose a day next week that we could meet. We have checked scheduling. I haven't checked yet to see what's available, but I think there's next week we could do Monday the 24th. Tuesday the 25th is the city open house for the comprehensive plan that's out. Wednesday the 26th is open. Thursday there's a FISD bond update meeting. So I put it on that one. And then Friday also, that's a tough day for people to.
Did you prefer to try to set that now?
I would like to,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, you shook your head on the Wednesday, Hannah. What's that?
We have the conference plan advisory committee meeting that morning on the 26th.
I'm sorry, I didn't specify. I'd love for this to be an evening meeting.
Yeah, she's looking at evening hours. You want to go ahead and set it? I'm okay.
So we're trying to get this session in before the next council meeting so that we can move forward. Yeah. 26 sounds good to me.
What day is it?
Pardon me?
There's a
Wednesday the 26th.
Wednesday the 26th. Council, y'all available? What'd you say? What, 5:30 is that what you're looking at?
That'd be great.
Can we set that for 5:30 next Wednesday? And then we have time to post that and everything. Okay. All right, have consensus on it. 5:30. Would that work? Sure.
Sure.
Okay. I like early stuff. I have some people signed up to public comment on this item. Annette Bennett.
Good morning, Annette Bennett, Fredericksburg resident. When I saw this on the agenda, I did some research on the Texas statutes on housing authorities, and I came away with a multitude of questions. The first is this the government's job? And again, I refer you back to the oath of office, which is to support the Constitution. And the stated job of government is to support our freedoms, not provide housing. I believe that is up to the private sector. Secondly, should you proceed with this investigation, I hope that the following issues would be addressed in your consideration. The authorities outlined in the statute are very broad, and they range from just helping people find a home, to building property, to buying land, to issuing bonds. And I would ask, where does this stop? Are we now going to compete with the private sector and private property owners? Why is it the taxpayers' burden to provide employee housing for local businesses and services? You just mentioned that there would be a board, but my question is how is the board funded? And how would the administration of the whole program be funded? How many and what government regulations would we have to adhere to and to monitor? And at what cost? What impact will these permanent, reoccurring administrative costs be on our local property taxes and tax rates? If there is any raise in taxes, we're actually hurting the very people that we're claiming to help. Overall, I would hope that the city would not engage in the expansion of the role of government, and I don't feel that housing is a function of government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annette. Jeanette Hormuth.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Jeanette. I live in the city. There were several people that wanted to talk, but people cannot show up at this time. I've asked Deborah Harbecker to speak for someone else who sent some of their questions and concerns. Wes was here. He always was very articulate, and he had to go. So I want to echo, really, Annette did a wonderful job, and those are many of the points that I would make, and I'm sure Wes would make as well. But a maxim of law, which is universal principles that all law is based, and it's recognized as true. All right. The main object of government is the protection and preservation of personal rights, private property, and public liberties, and upholding the law of God. As Annette mentioned, he all took an oath of office to the Constitution. The Constitution was written to protect the people's inherent rights. That's the number one job. The city obviously helps provide some services because as a people that helps us all, because we can't build a road, it's easier to give a little money to the city to help build that for everyone. We all benefit. We all benefit from the utilities, from the sewer, that sort of thing. Getting into these other areas like housing, like golf courses, like swimming parks, it benefits some people, but then people like me, the working people, are the ones paying for it as we see government grow, all these layers. I am concerned that you're setting up another entity that is away from the people. It's an appointed board that's not answerable to the people, not elected by the people. That's a problem. But three things that I notice happens when we expand government like this. Number one, it ends up costing us money, the people that you say you want to help. And that's making my home unaffordable. And that's why people are leaving, and you're having trouble having housing. Number two is the government gets bigger and more control over the people's lives. I'm sorry.
Distorting.
Yeah, I'm not a professional.
No.
Yeah. And then the third thing is that you end up usually with not affordable housing. You end up with bigger problems. So a couple things from Wes real quick. He says crime, drugs, and I think he said prostitution is often the impact of public housing, which also takes from the people the opportunity for home ownership. It creates higher taxes to sustain the debt and the budget, and who pays the greatest share of taxes for their income? Is it not the working class and low income whom our governments say they want to help? Are these not the people that have the least disposable income? And I'm going to raise my hand on that. I don't have disposable income, so it's going to affect me the most, people like me. Yet they are the ones that will be burdened by the cost of government affordable housing projects. So the more government gets bigger, the more there's going to be taxes. And so anyway, I would oppose this wholeheartedly. There's other solutions. It's something that the business owners should get together on. Government can't solve all the problems. They're not meant to. Please go back to fundamental principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. I do have two others signed up, and I don't see them. I saw Mr. Hester leave. And Deborah Hawbucker, are you here? Okay, Deborah. Say again, Jeanette. Okay. I know Mr. Hester. I will contact him and get his comments. Yeah. And
good morning, Mayor, Council, and City staff. Deborah Hoppecker, and I live in the city. First of all, Mayor, this doesn't have anything to do with this, but I would like to acknowledge Stacy Coleman, a longtime employee of the city.
thank you.
I'd like to thank Bobby and Emily for looking into this, into affordable housing. And thank you for tabling it so we can do our research too. In County Commissioner's Court, Mayor was there. We need to know more information. We need to have public hearing for all of this. Thank you. Yes, I've been asked to speak, and it's Judith Roast. She does live in the city, and I've been asked to read this. Since I have had experience with public housing authorities, working from 1994 to 2000 with two separate housing authorities, I have a few questions. What will be the specific job of the housing authority? Usually they are established to run public housing provided by the government. Monies must be obtained from either the federal or state government to supplement the authority. 2, what is the state's rules and regulations regarding how it affects a homeowner's real estate taxes? I've not been able to find anything regarding the minimum or maximum percentage of property value the city is allowed to assess each property. I've placed phone calls to the state of Texas to find out more info, but no one returned my phone calls. I think the homeowners in Fredericksburg have a right to know how much it will affect their real estate taxes. 3, how about combining a public housing authority with the county to encompass the entire Gillespie County? This way, more money can be raised if indeed a public housing authority is established. Why put the burden on just the homeowners in Fredericksburg? This should be a county problem, not just a city problem. I will not be able to attend the meeting on Tuesday at 9 a.m. as I have an appointment in Kerrville that I cannot miss. I would be willing to talk to you on the phone if you have any answers to these questions. Since I do have experience with the Public Housing Authority, I feel I have the right to ask these questions and voice my concern. It's not that I'm against a public housing authority. I suggested it over 2 years ago to the Chamber of Commerce president. In fact, I met with her and a bunch of others in regard to affordable housing, as I did a large affordable housing project during the time I was director of my former city housing authority. I presented some of the brochures I used in copies of newspaper articles used to promote our affordable housing project. I was not asked to return to talk to others, so I guess they didn't like what we did to get the city involved. Judith Roast, and I have her letter.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Would you mind giving that to the city secretary? And I know Ms. Rose, I'll call her. She asks to be called for further comment. I'll do that.
Mayor, I spoke with, I believe it's Miss Ross last night, and
Oh.
she is from Minnesota, and that's where she works with public housing authorities, and they're set up very differently than they are here. They had in Minnesota had the ability to levy taxes, and that is not a privilege that they're granted here in Texas. And just to mention, the county has had the option to join the Housing Foundation, but it's chosen not to do so at this time.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that addendum to the comments. All right. Do we need to take specific action to set up the next meeting for this, which we just sort of scheduled, or because we don't have any action to take on this today?
No, I think staff heard when to schedule a meeting if they want to show up.
Great. Thank you for raising your questions. They're my questions too, many of them. And so the process has just started to research this and examine to see if it's a good fit for Fredericksburg. Thank you. A request from Councilman Klein to jump to which one B? Item 8B. Okay, Council. Take action on a new lease agreement with the Hill Country United for use of the property. You have to get back to your banking job. Is that the deal? Okay. Take action on the new lease for Hill Country United for use of the property next to Oak Crest for soccer fields. Ms. Schmidt.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. This is just some paperwork that we need to get clarified. We had a lease agreement with what was known then as the American Youth Soccer Association, Region 714 here in Fredericksburg, where Dan Kemp was the president then. The lease started back in 2018 and then automatically renewed annually starting in April of 2020. Last year, they approached and said they had done some reorganization and they have a new name now, Hill Country United. So we officially canceled the lease with the AYSO effective the end of this month, and we'd like to renew the lease with the new organization under the new name. Everything else would stay basically the same.
Same terms, new name.
Yes, sir.
I'll move to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mayor.
Dan.
Good job. I know, Dan, you want to listen to the audit report, don't you?
Dan, I do appreciate what you do for the Soccer Association kids in town. Thanks. Let's just go ahead and do number C. That's a quick one too. Take action, or maybe a quick one. Take action on request to waive fees up to a minimum of $1,500 for the Optimist Club to use the fields at LBJMP during the spring T-ball season. Andrea?
Morning again, Mayor and Council. The Optimist T-ball or Optimist Club hosts the T-ball here in Fredericksburg. Several years ago, they provided the funding to build the current T-ball field, including fencing, dugouts, bleachers, the portable fencing. They provided some funding for irrigation. They also renovated the concession stand out there. We don't charge fees for the use of that field, but they've become so large they're overflowing and need a second field. So they have requested us to waive a fee waiver for use of that second field. So we're requesting up to $1,500 a year so that they can overflow onto a second field, and this to be an annual waiver for them. They do support the city and the Parks Department in many other ways as well.
I move that we approve the request to waive the fees.
Second. Voted second to approve the waiver of these fees on behalf of the Optimist Club. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Are there
I'm a
any
member of the
optimists
Optimist Club.
besides Tony? Well, I just wanted to say thank you for everything else you've done.
Winnie's here, the president right now, here in the back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, then we'll go to 7A, fiscal year 2022 annual audit and financial statement based on the audit conducted by ABIP. Do we want to start with Laura? Okay.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. ABIP, our accounting and auditing firm, has performed an audit of the city's financials for fiscal year 2022. And Janet Pittman, CPA with ABIP, is here to provide an overview of our financials.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council, City
Morning,
staff.
Deb.
Thank you so much for having me here this morning to go over the results of your 2022 audit. As you can see, you have a large document in front of you. I'm just going to give you some highlights, and then if you have any questions, please let me know. So beginning on page 1, which is actually a couple pages in the document, is our independent auditor's report. It is our opinion on your financial statements. It is what we call an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can give the city. It basically says that we did not make any modifications to your financials, and they are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. 3 pages of a lot of verbiage to say just that. So that's always good news. We're always happy to report the unmodified opinion. Beginning on page 5 is the management discussion and analysis. This is a comparative analysis between 2021 and 2022. I like to turn to page 7. This is the government-wide financial analysis. So you have your governmental funds all in one column, which includes your general fund, your debt service, and your capital projects fund. And then your business type activities, which are your enterprise funds, your electric, water, sewer, landfill, EMS, and the golf. I might have forgotten one. Anyway, the important number on that page is the unrestricted balance of your net position. You can see in the governmental activities, it went from 4.6 million to 5.1 million this year. But most of that increase is due to increased sales tax. You did have the ARPA grant that you spent some of the money this year. And the increase in the business type activities was from your water and sewer rates, your garbage, and also your electric fund. Moving on to page 9. At the bottom of that page, you can see that the city has been very busy with adding some capital assets this year, a little over $8 million. Some of the larger ones were in the water and sewer department, the lift station, and the sewer expansion. And then you purchased quite a bit of equipment this year, generators, fire pumper, and then the parks department, you did a restoration to your restrooms, and also you had some pool work done.
I'm sorry, Janet, the restrooms and what?
Sorry. The restrooms, and you did some pool restoration on your pool. Sorry. And also you bought a paver for that department. Now it's going to skip to page 18. These are your individual governmental funds. The important number on that page is down on the bottom. It's your unassigned fund balance in the general fund, which is $13.7 million. It does represent 7 months of operating expenditures. It's a little bit over what Government Finance Officers Association recommends, 4 to 6 months. So it's not terribly over, and we'd like to see a nice fund balance. It means you're healthy and you have some ability to weather any economic declines or whatever. So, and that is really meant for your ongoing operations for your next year's budget. Now I was going to turn to page 26. This is the operations of your enterprise funds. So your enterprise funds are meant to be self-supporting through charges to the users of those services. And as you can see, the change in net position at the bottom of the page for each of the different enterprise funds did provide a small increase. So that's always good news. Again, they are meant to be self-supported through your residential, your commercial businesses, and such. On page 35 are the notes to the financial statements. I'm not going to go over any individual note unless someone had a question about one. There's really no changes from the prior year, and there's nothing of concern to be noted in there. So now I'm going to skip all the way to page 81. This is a new section for the city. It is the federal compliance section. You did receive some American Rescue Plan funds this year. We are required to do a specific audit over those funds. So the first report is we are required to do our audit in accordance with generally government auditing standards because you did receive these federal funds. And we did not identify any deficiencies in your internal controls over the financial report process. That is the first report. The second report is specific to the federal funds that you did receive. So we did not have any findings or question costs on those funds that you received from the government. You spent the money on equipment, some generators. You did release some of the funds to the not-for-profits in the area so that they could upgrade. And also you spent a small amount on some of your payroll. You do have some funds left over to be, and I think they've been budgeted for the 2023 fiscal year. That's all I had, unless someone has a question.
I do, with regard to what you just talked about. Is it your job as the auditor just to approve that the funds were spent correctly? Or do you also look at what the requirements are for the recipients to report?
Are you talking about the not-for-profits?
Yes.
They do need to. I think it was the application process needed to be approved for them to get the funds, and then to verify how they're using the funds.
So was it part of your auditing process to see how they've been responding correctly to after receiving funds? I mean,
now we didn't directly go to the not-for-profit and look at their books, but that is the city's responsibility, and what we do is look to make sure that the city has reviewed them.
Okay, and that's my question. Thank you. So Laura, they've been, I know Krista's not here, and but she testified to me that they have all of those reports in and they've been reporting correctly. So relative to the requirements of the contract. Okay, thank you.
And that was a little over $400,000
Yes.
that was dispersed to
That's 6 or 7 entities, as I recall.
yes.
Yeah. Any other questions, Council?
I do have one question on
Yes,
page 40. It's talking about depreciation of assets and infrastructure. Is listed depreciating useful life of 30 years. I'm just curious, do y'all look into, okay, this bridge is 75 years old. It's, it's used up its value. I mean, do y'all comment on those and how percentage of structures that are past 30 years?
What we look at is that the city is making that estimate and it's reasonable. So okay. As far as us determining, it's really for the city's management team to determine the number of years that would be applicable.
Other questions?
I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Laura and Krista. We're going to miss Laura, but she's done a good job training Krista. And thank you for everything that they do to get us our information that we need to perform our audit.
Thank you for that. Anything further on this one?
Sorry. Staff recommends that the financial statements be accepted into the city's records.
I move to approve to accept the financials as presented.
Second.
The motion second to approve this audit financial statement. They say aye. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
There you go. Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you so much.
You like your work?
I love my work. I've been
Okay.
doing it about 32 years.
I'm so glad there are people like you in the world.
I don't do taxes.
Item 9A, change, 9, city manager report.
Okay, Mayor, Council, just wanted to give you a quick update. I'm going to make one change, a pretty major change to my city manager report. We'll do this once monthly, probably the second meeting of each month. I'll provide a lot of information to the council, hopefully a lot of useful information in a packet, and I will touch on at a very high level major items. Right now I have 3 categories, projects, development, and financial status update. So if we have any major projects going on, if we have any major developments going on, coming up, have recently been completed, in terms of financial status, one of the things that we'll report on is sales tax collection for the month previous. We'll give you a year-to-date, quarterly totals, things like that. Again, I would like for the council to be able to hear this from staff, just to give a very high-level update, and then also provide the information where you can dig into it a little bit deeper, just all in one place. Instead of doing separate reports, kind of hit and miss, just so you have this information in hand and you're updated with the latest information. The second item I wanted to talk about was employee recognitions. I'm proud of the fact that we have changed the process for employee recognitions, getting folks in front of the council, new employees, putting a face with the name. It means a lot to them to be in front of you and be recognized. We recently went through a staff retreat where it was suggested that we might form a small group that reviews employee recognitions before we bring them to council, make it a little bit tougher to get to the podium for a recognition, real special recognition. So we're working on that. You notice today we suspended employee recognitions. We hope to have something in place. We're doing a follow-up from our retreat over the next couple of weeks. So expect that process to be even better.
Excellent. Right. Item 9, any comment, question? Okay. Item 10, items for future agenda.
Sorry. I want to back up to item 9. Did you report on the town hall, the neighborhood meeting, because that was so positive, and we weren't all there.
Sure. Well, thank you, Emily and Sharon, for attending our 4th town hall, hosted by Graham Pearson and his wife, Renee. Good turnout. I believe we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 people in attendance. So again, I start the meetings with an update similar to Coffee with the City Manager, what's going on in the community, what's coming up on council. We talked about the comprehensive plan a little bit. Had a lot of information regarding our new stage 4 watering restrictions, how to sign up for to receive council agendas. And then we just went around and asked everyone to introduce themselves and if they had any kind of issue or comments. So we had a lot of positive, I'd say 95% positive comments, a lot of really good questions. There was, of course, in that particular neighborhood, it's a very popular, pretty intense STR neighborhood. We knew that going in. Just right off the bat, there were a number of comments about from long-term residents about the lack of neighbors. Not really a lot of issues. I think there was parking potentially mentioned. But overall, just I thought real good comments, real good flow of information, a lot of concentration on watering. Again, we talked about some transportation projects from the relief route down to the project that goes through that neighborhood, the extension of Mulberry. So again, this is an opportunity to really take that coffee with the city manager to the doorstep of these neighbors, standing with their neighbors, talking about neighborhood issues, not just neighborhood issues. We talked about open containers on Main Street. That was a concern of a number of people. What am I forgetting, Emily, Sharon?
I think you hit everything. More than the comments that night, I've heard a lot of positive comments afterward that they felt like they were being heard by the city. So I would encourage anyone that when it comes to your neighborhood to go, because it's really effective. And I thank you for doing those, Clint.
Right. And I wanted to mention also that we notice each one of these meetings as a quorum of the council. So council, all of you are welcome to attend. There's no issue with that. I will say that there has been no collective discussion of the council at any one of these meetings. So it means a lot to me that y'all are there. In terms of the Hammersons that hosted the third town hall, in my almost 30-year career, I've never attended a council meeting in someone's driveway, which is exactly what we had that day. So all of you were there. Again, it just means a lot to me. It means a lot to the folks in attendance. So thank you for allowing me to do this.
Did Graham and Renee provide a buffet?
Oh, they did,
Oh.
and you missed out, Mayor. It was a buffet, a cooler so heavy it took three of us to lift it full of water and refreshment. So
I'm sorry, Mr.
They did not. Let's not get that going. That's a requirement to have it in your driveway that you have to provide food.
it's not a requirement, but seems to be a competition that's starting here.
All right, anything else about item 9? All right, ready for item 10, items for future agenda.
Okay, and we do have just a couple of corrections here as I move through. Of course, we have the approval of the minutes from the meeting today. We will go ahead and add the item, council consideration of approval of forming, creating a housing authority. We'll add that to the agenda as a placeholder for after the workshop that we have. The council wants to continue with that. We have on the agenda twice here consideration of approving concept for a future nature center at Lady Bird Johnson Municipal Park. So fundraising may begin. Andrea, we're going to be okay on that one. Okay. We have an amendment to the LCRA radio agreement, Chief Bizzle's item. We'll be ready to go on that. Follow up from Chris's item a couple of weeks ago on the franchise agreement for Universal Natural Gas. I know that Chris and Lynn have been visiting with Universal Natural Gas and other communities that have that utility. So we should be able to answer any questions, address any concerns the council may have, provide some additional information on that before that's approved by the council. We will not be discussing the future viability of the Fredericksburg Middle School, but rather the future viability of Fort Martin Scott. So FMS, I'm not sure how that got on there as Fredericksburg Middle School, but we will not be talking about the middle school. I think that was a computer glitch, the FMS. I'm not. Okay.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. I wish we did control that property.
Right. We have a landmark designation for 701 North Milam Street, Jack Staling home. And that is it for now.
Comments, questions?
I have a question on the universal natural gas. I think it's supposed to be 30 days out in April 4th to May 2nd. That's 30 days. We need to wait another.
It's exactly 30 days.
Okay.
However, Chief Bizzle and I have been talking. It might be the second meeting in May. We still have some questions that are that we've asked of natural gas. So if we get those responses, we might be ready by the second. If not, it'll be the second meeting in May.
And we had talked about a charter review committee. Is that something, probably not for next time, but do we need to put it on the future?
Right, and as I mentioned last time, I wanted to throw that out to this council. That will be something that we really start to engage in after the election. I just wanted to tee that up as so the council would be focused on that just a little bit more for after the election.
And then do we have a date for the next town hall?
I would have to check with our PIO again. Now that the time has changed, we're really going to try to do those twice a month. Second and fourth Thursday of the month.
Anything else on future agenda items? All right, before we adjourn, let me make one comment that's relative to a action we took today. In my vote, I was, and it has to do with Mr. Ellis's STR. You all know where I stand on the issue of STRs in the neighborhood and so forth, and what we've been working on with the task force and filling in some needed gaps, I think, in the current ordinance and so forth. But I'm guided by, and I respect Ms. Kirchner so much, by and her vote and everybody's vote, but I'm guided by when somebody follows the rules under the existing ordinance, having to come up with a reason not to approve it. I'm just not comfortable with that yet. Maybe I should. But when they followed the rules and have said, here's our application, we followed the rules, and we know that we put well on this according to current rules. That's why we're working so hard to change the regulation so that everybody understands what our goals are long term with regard to SDR presence in the neighborhood. Also, the particular location of this property was a factor in my decision. Having STR right across the fence from Buckle Primes, and it's a festive place. But anyway, I just wanted, for those who are watching at this council, I don't like to appear inconsistent in the middle of a meeting. So I just felt the sensitivity to express that. Anything else before we adjourn? Thank you for those.
Oh, Carol.
I just wanted to remind everybody it's the 18th of April. You remember the long telephone about volunteer. Ordinary citizens do great things. There were 5 who rode that night. Over there actually got arrested by the British and didn't get to finish his ride. But for the ladies in the audience, there was a young 15-year-old girl. She rode far longer than volunteer. And side saddle.
I didn't learn that in school.
No, you don't. You learn the long telephone, but I think they all deserve it.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. That's a nice remembrance. Okay, Council.
Move we adjourn.
Second. Motion second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you.